Isagi Yoichi is the perfect protagonist in every single way. Thank you to our final patrons, Strawbones, Widow 4765, Midnight Gem Lord, Sean, and Artgoon. Now, from this breakdown / discussion on why Isagi Yoichi of Blue Rock is the perfect protagonist, please come here and leave your own thoughts on Isagi in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, hit that little notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below, eSport for as $1, count them $1 month, exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, let's hop into the discussion. What's up, guys? Elwood Pencil here, and here we are to talk about Isagi Yoichi and how I believe he is the perfect protagonist. And I know that's a pretty bold claim to make. And let me clarify something. Despite me believing that Isagi Yoichi is in fact the perfect protagonist, I don't think he's my favorite. Nor do I believe he's the best new gen protagonist. I just think he's the perfect protagonist. And now I know that sounds weird, wrong, and backwards, but I have he's in contention. I will admit, he is very much in contention for my top spot. But he's like 2 or 3, but he's still amazing, and let me actually quantify why. Allow me to read to you the definition of protagonist. Straight from Google. You can find the same definition if you pop it in right into the search bar, protagonist definition. Noun, the leading character or one of the major characters in a drama, movie, novel, or other fictional text. Subdefinition, the main figure or one of the most prominent figures in a real situation. And second subdefinition, an advocate or champion of a particular cause or idea. Isagi Yoichi is all 3 of these, and he does them all very, very well. Let's go over the simplest definition. The leading character or one of the major characters in a drama, movie, novel, or other fictional text. He is just the main character. He's the first character we're introduced to that actually becomes a major factor in Blue Lock. Every other character we get introduced to first immediately falls away. Whether it be Kira, whether it be his homie, whether it be anyone who was on that field, it was realistically Isagi Yoichi who came forth, and a majority of the narrative is from his specific perspective. That's just inarguable. From all of Team Z, to all the second selection, to all of the third selection, to the U20 game, to all the way up to now, we are following Isagi Yoichi in his developments. He is the leading character. I'm pretty sure there's no debate. It got so bad that if people were getting confused about who the leading character was, Nagi literally got his own manga. People who wanted Nagi to be the main character, you got that in his own manga. So that's how much it is clear that Isagi Yoichi is the main character. So he does that fine. That's not necessarily very difficult to do, just have a main character. I'm trying to think of a very specific situation where it may get confusing. The only time it may have gotten confusing is in something like God of High School, where there was a moment where the main character was absent for a long period of the story. I'm not going to explain how or why, but it did happen, and there's a lot of people, you can go check the comments on that span of the narrative, a lot of people were wondering, is X character even the main character anymore? They're not even here. So that's the only time. If you remove your main character for large swaths of the narrative, then you have points where you may have your readers confused, but I think the most that Isagi ever disappears for is 2 chapters. That's it. Blue Lock is over 200 chapters now. The longest he's been gone is about 100th of the narrative. That's how much he's been off screen, if he ever really is off screen. That's how much of a main character he is. That's not difficult to do. You just do that. A lot of people do that, sometimes to the detriment of their main character. I'd say Midori Izuku suffers from overly super main character syndrome, as I like to call it. Legitimately, he's sometimes the main character too hard, and that's an issue. I think JJK is another series that has really good balance, but Isagi Yoichi does perfect in this role. He is the leading character, but he doesn't feel overly saturated as the leading character, which is a very hard balance to do. And the way that the Blue Lock mangaka does this very well is by having every single side character, from our Protagonist and Bachira, to our secondary main rival in Rin, to our surprise characters like Shido. He gives extra characterization and extra time to other characters. He gives them extra weight, extra momentum, so it feels like everyone can be their own main character. It's why when Naoki got a manga, nobody batted an eye. because Nagi was set up so well as a character that he could get his own manga. Reo could get his own manga. Chigiri could get his own manga. Kunigami could get his own manga. Rin could definitely get his own manga. Sei could get his own manga. Shido could get his own manga. The whole story, despite being built around Isagi and his development as a striker and as an individual, is still so well structured that despite him clearly being the leading character, despite him clearly being the protagonist of our story, every other character is strong enough of a character on their own that you 100% believe they could lead their own stories, not just based off their character design, which is another thing in something like My Hero Academia, but also based on the character that is established relative to Isagi Yoichi. That is extremely impressive and extremely difficult to do, but it really allows for Isagi to come forth as one of the leading characters. And the next definition that I think Isagi does really, really well with is obviously the main figure, or one of the most prominent figures in a real situation. Now, obviously, Blue Lock is not real. Unfortunately, Japan did not win the U20 World Cup. They were not cooking. Maybe next time. Maybe they'll actually make a Blue Lock because of the previous World Cup. But regardless of that, regardless of whatever that has to do, the main and most important thing about the idea of Isagi being the quote-unquote main figure or most prominent figures in a real situation, and why I think he does that perfectly, is because Isagi is quite directly responsible for a lot of fan-favorite characters being fan-favorite characters through awakening them. Isagi is a conduit for other characters that also uses other characters as conduits. And that's very difficult to do. It is another common trait of main characters, though. If you look around in a lot of different series, main characters are quite pivotal to the side characters within their narrative. Think of stories like Magi. Think of stories like The Adventures of Sinbad. Think of stories like Dragon Ball. Think of stories like Naruto. Think of stories like Bleach. The main character typically does have a lot of impact in terms of their general situation and impacting other characters in their respective situations. That's why they're the main character. But the reason I say Isagi does this so well is because, unlike in cases like My Hero Academia, in cases like Magi, in cases, well, then again, I will admit, Magi does it, but in Adventures of Sinbad, I would say this is a different case. Stories like that typically have the main character developing in of themselves, but rarely taking aspects from the world around them. They will develop because of the world around them, or I don't want to say worse, but sometimes worse, they will not change at all, as they are supposed to be the reflecting mirror for all other characters to bounce off of and develop and change. That's the case for things like My Hero Academia, that's the case for things like Adventures of Sinbad, that's the case for things like Fire Force. It's just how the series works sometimes, and it works really, really well in other cases. The ability to have your character influence the world rather than the world influencing your character is good, and it shows a sign of solid morals and a general well understanding of the character itself and how they can affect the world. However, the reason I think Isagi is perfect is because while he is a leading and guiding part of the world, and he develops other characters via awakening them through his own internal mentality, he also takes pieces of other characters who are also in the world, which makes it feel like Isagi is almost the culmination of Blue Lock in itself. He uses all of these different aspects of different players, from taking aspects of their physicality, to their movements, to their techniques, to how they see the world itself. He all takes what they have and incorporates it into himself. So he's not just giving out everything. He's not just giving out these awakenings, these character changes, these developments, like a lot of other main characters who mainly act as a reflection do. But on top of that, he's taking from these characters. He's absorbing their abilities. He's becoming stronger of himself by taking what he views useful from these other characters, which in a way allows some characters who get removed from the narrative to live on through him, which is something that's very difficult to do for a protagonist. So by being this summation, being this totality, being, ironically enough, Blue Lock itself in ideology, mentality, and physicality, he's also absorbing everything the world has to offer and giving it new meaning and new purpose through himself, which as a protagonist is pretty difficult to do when you're writing them as either A, a reflection, or B, a consistently tortured and developed character, or somewhere in between. Isagi is not just the most prominent figure of Blue Lock because, he's the main character, but he's also the most prominent figure in Blue Lock because he is a culmination of what Blue Lock is, of multiple different characters, multiple different ideologies, and multiple different experiences that make Isagi Blue Lock itself, ironically enough. By being the culmination of ego, other players, and ideologies, He is, ironically enough, the series itself personified. Why he's considered the hero, why he got the goal in the last U20 match, why he's the protagonist of the story of Blue Lock itself. It's because he himself is the summation by being everything. And speaking of, that transitions smoothly into the final major definition of protagonist, an advocate or champion of a particular cause or idea. If there is any person in all of Blue Lock who perfectly embodies the ideals that Ego Jinpachi hopes to teach these young men, it is Isagi Yoichi, a person who at the start of the series was willing to give up a chance at the goal because he was willing to have faith in other people and suppress his own ego, is now a person who is willing to stomp over the dreams, break down and destroy the ideologies and paths of others, and then take what they want from those people that they've just destroyed and make himself better to score his own goals and to control the game himself. The whole idea of building a positive, controlling, well-developed, and understood ego is the main goal of Blue Lock. He is the advocate and the champion of that idea. He is the protagonist and the hero of Blue Lock, as he is the one who guided them to victory and really won the U20 game with that clutch direct shot right there at the end. He is the motto. He is the Blue Lock put forward. This really is our Blue Lock. Isagi Yoichi perfects that. He puts that forward, and it makes it so good. Because without that, if he wasn't any of these things, I couldn't call him a perfect protagonist. I couldn't say he checks every single box, but he does. He does it in ways that pretty much it's realistically hard, right? I can't say that there are not other perfect protagonists, people who do not fill out all the 3 typical definitions that I can find when I put them in Google. Like, there are definitely other characters who can be argued to do just that. But I think Isagi does it so well. I think his writing allows for it to be done so well. And the other part that is not at all within just strict definitions of the word protagonist, but this is also just a personal thing. A lot of main characters end up being really powerful, like within the respective context of their series. Not every series is a battle manga. Blue Lock is not a battle manga. It has fighting in it, because everything has fighting in it. But in reality, this isn't really like a fisticuffs kind of thing. There aren't really power levels. No one's destroying mountains or planets or anything. We aren't scaling, but we are. But regardless of that, the reason Isagi works so well for me as a protagonist is that I like my protagonist to be balanced. I personally kinda don't like it when the protagonist is the strongest thing to ever think in their world. It's just the thing that I find a little bit boring. I don't know why. I think it's mainly because it makes it that every single fight pretty much has no tension, and then removing it from the context of just battle manga, every single interaction has pretty much no tension, because, you know, the main character is so unbelievably broken that nothing can really happen to them unless you introduce extremely powerful opponents, which can happen. But the reason Isagi works so well is because within the narrative of Blue Lock, he is perfectly balanced. Like, legitimately, it's an amazing balancing act that the mangaka has done to keep Isagi where he is relatively without snapping him in half and making him blatantly overpowered, and at the same time not making him underpowered, because that's also a problem. I don't like it when the MC's useless. I don't like it when it feels like, oh yeah, the MC's there because, you know, they were the chosen MC, but the author like changed their mind about a third of the way through and decided to make this other character the secret MC that we're gonna follow, and they'll be strong enough to handle all the challenges. Meanwhile, the actual MC sort of just falls behind that character and hopes for the best. I don't like that either. It's a very fine balance to make a good protagonist in my mind, and while some series can succeed at that, I believe Blue Lock succeeds at it very well because of where Isagi Yoichi starts and how the narrative progresses naturally to keep him balanced. Starting him off where he was a fair place to start him. He was just powerful enough to be relevant, yet just not powerful enough to overpower and override the rest of his team, which is very important for the entire Team Z arc. Then he had a little bit of solo training where he managed to get his gains up just enough that he could be relevant enough for the next arc, but not relevant enough that he would steamroll through it, relevant enough that he wouldn't immediately get body bagged, but he wouldn't have to fall out, which led to really good balancing for the second selection in all of its entirety, and him growing further and further throughout to make sure that he stays that nice line between broken, as some characters are within Blue Lock, and not underpowered, which some characters also are in Blue Lock. Having him stay in that perfect protagonistic spot, because I'd say that's where you want your protagonist. You want your protagonist to struggle for every single victory that they have, and not necessarily bowl it over or get broken by every single encounter they have. You want to have moments where your character peaks out, appears to be one of the strongest, appears to be that top tier, that leading character, but at the same time, you don't want that character to appear that so often that the feeling of them appearing at that pinnacle doesn't necessarily hit the same as it used to. That's why moments like the end of the U20 game hit so hard, because Isagi Yoichi is perfectly balanced at that point in the narrative. He's not the strongest person there, he's not the fastest person there. Heck, you can make solid arguments that he's not even the smartest person there, but he has just enough of all of those features and just enough technique that he managed to use luck to get that win. And when he got that win, it felt amazing. It felt hype. That is my favorite moment in all of the manga so far. That's how amazing and beautiful it is, but it wouldn't have worked if Isagi was so underpowered that he couldn't have done it, obviously, and it wouldn't have worked if Isagi just won every single thing he ran into. If he just bowled over every single bit of competition without any struggle. It's that perfect balance between making your main character strong enough that it makes sense that they are the main character, but not making them so strong that it doesn't make sense why we even have a story. And it's extra difficult to do that in a manga like Blue Lock, where power isn't necessarily a thing that can be quantified and easily measured. We cannot do this guy's planetary, this guy's universal, this guy's multiversal. We can't do that in Blue Lock. We have to measure a totality of their skills and weigh them against other people with a varying set of skills, all with a whole bunch of unique weapons that may overlap in interesting ways. Yet somehow the mangaka has managed to keep Isagi in that perfect point, that beautiful nexus point of absolute balance, where he has not snapped the narrative in half, yet the narrative has not snapped him. And that's amazing. That's what makes it so perfect to me. The fact that throughout the entire manga, and you can even see it in the community when we talk about Isagi, at the start of an arc, Isagi seems like fodder. But by the middle of the arc, he seems relative. And by the end of the arc, he seems like a deity. That is beautiful. The fact that we can have that situation repeat over and over again. And the best part about it is that it doesn't feel forced. Because the power progression, I keep mentioning power, but it's the best way to quantify it. The power progression is so well structured that it all makes sense when he struggles again or when he falls behind again. Because he's getting introduced to new levels of threats. He's getting introduced to higher quality players. He's getting introduced to new people that will challenge him in different ways, whether it be Baro, Kaiser, Rin. All these different characters will come in at the perfect point for them to insert themselves into the narrative for Isagi to grow at a relative pace that keeps him interesting, that keeps his battles intense, that keeps his interactions intense, and keeps Isagi in that perfect position of balance. And that, I think, is what you need for a protagonist. Essentially, your story usually is sort of built around your protagonist. There is a world around them, and you should work to have a world that is not just entirely reliant on your protagonist. However, the protagonist still is just that, the main leading actor. So you want a world that can function with them and for them, not against them and throw them out. And Isagi does that perfectly fine. He does that amazingly. And I think that's what makes him a perfect protagonist. That perfect ability of balance, to meet all the specific criteria, to have all these specific steps, to be not the worst but not the best is what allows for that perfect feeling. Because I'm always engaged in what Isagi has to do. I'm never reading it and just disengaged because I know Isagi's going to lose, or I'm disengaged because I know Isagi's going to win. I'm in that perfect point, that point where you always want to grab your readers, where you're constantly wondering, is he going to succeed? Is he going to fail? Is he going to succeed? Is he going to fail? That balance, that back and forth, that is perfect storytelling. That is how you make a character feel intense, real, and palpable, because that's our lives. We're always going forward with the wondering of whether or not we'll fail or whether or not we'll succeed. And it's very hard to do that in fiction, especially with main characters, considering how important they typically are to the crux of your narrative. But Blue Lock mangaka managed to pull it off, managed to make a character that is so strong that they're able to do things that other characters fail to do, but not so overly strong that they can still be countered and outdone by other characters, which feeds into the whole idea of Isagi being this not just balanced piece for himself in the overall narrative, but a balanced piece within this world of complex, varied, and interesting characters. Isagi feels like, despite being the main character, he's on equal playing field with everybody there. Whether it be Kunigami, whether it be Kaiser, whether it be Rin, whether it be Shido, he is there on the same pitch as them as an equal. And that equality allows Blue Lock itself to feel a lot more whole, a lot more complete. There are certain shows where characters become so powerful or so over-centralized that they kind of negate the purpose of other characters. Like Dragon Ball, as much as I love it, it has this issue very heavily. A lot of times, Dragon Ball, especially in recent memory, has become the Goku show. GT might as well have been Goku Time. Dragon Ball Super might as well have been Goku Super. Like, legitimately, the show will sometimes over-focus on its main character and pretty much make the entire rest of the cast irrelevant, while still having good characters that your audience wants to see. That's why people want to see Krillin do good. That people want to see Piccolo do good. That's why people want to see Gohan do good. Because these characters had their little moment in the light, but there was such an over-centralization on certain characters that left them in the dust. Same thing happened in something like Naruto. Same thing happened in something like Bleach. The big three, I'm not sure about One Piece. I have not read One Piece yet, but the big three has this issue, and a lot of manga and a lot of stories in general, not just manga, have an issue of this over-centralization of the protagonist and making them too powerful for their own story, to the point where every other character feels almost useless. But with Blue Lock, with how Isagi is written and how Isagi is balanced with the narrative and mind, the beautiful, most amazing thing about it is that this cycle feels perfectly natural. The world itself is built for Isagi, and Isagi himself is built for the world. And I think there really can be no better combination than that. However, that's what I think. Please tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you think I'm tripping? Do you think Isagi is not the perfect protagonist? Do you think there are other characters who embody this just as much as Isagi, or even better than him? Please let me know all that and more in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure that little notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below. You support as low as $1 a month. Thanks to the videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.